Augustus, first Emperor of Rome, by Adrian Goldsworthy. The character. Gaius Octavius Thurnus is also known as Gaius Julius Caesar Octavius Augustus. According to the historians, he was probably born in 63 before Christ, on the 23rd of September, and on the day of his birth, his father Gaius Octavius decided to give him the cognomen Thurnus, in memory of the origins of his ancestors, or maybe because of the victory over fugitive slaves in Thurna. Octavianus came from an equestrian branch of the gens Octavia, but later he was adopted by Julius Caesar. So after the dictator's murder, Octavianus succeeded him and took in addition the name Julius and the cognomen Caesar. In the year 27 before Christ, he was given the title of Augustus. That is why he was best known with this title. He started his career when he was very young. From a young age he took part in the military Roman life, especially because of his adoption. He trained hard so that he could soon become one of the best warriors in the Roman army, and he also succeeded in becoming a good and respected commander. He was destined to greatness because of the influence of Caesar, but then he managed to confirm his destiny by his conquest with his military and political actions and skills. In fact, when he was just a child, Augustus was already one of the most magnificent men in history, and was already predestined to success because of different reasons. First of all, he had a lot of qualities. He was really clever and brilliant, he took great care of reinventing himself during his lifetime, he was vigorous and he loved culture and especially literature. On the other hand, he was ambitious, scheming, devious, ruthless, and without scruples. Consequently, he was extremely successful during his political career, and it also helped him many times against his enemies. He had a lot of fame, especially because of his bloodline. He descended from the gens Julia by his mother and from the gens Octavia by his father. He was the son of Gaius Octavius and Dacia Major, who was the daughter of Caesar's sister Julia, so Augustus was the grandnephew of Caesar, and he also had a sister named Octavia, who had a son called Marcellus from her first husband. Besides dedicating himself to military life, he also focused on his personal life. He married twice. His first wife was Scribonia, and then he married Livia, that brought him two sons-in-law, Tiberius and Drusus. Drusus gave Augustus two grandnephews, since he had married Antonia, the Octavia's daughter, Germanicus and Claudius. His first son, Germanicus, married Agrippina, who descended from Scribonia, and they had two children, Agrippina, minor, Nero's mother, and Caius, known as Caligula. The Review. Augustus was the first emperor, the man who finally replaced the Republic, which had lasted for almost half a millennium, with a veiled monarchy. The system he created gave the empire other 250 years of stability, when it was both larger and more prosperous than at any other time. In the 3rd century Annus Domini, it faced decades of crisis, and survived only after extensive reforms. But even so, the Roman emperors who ruled from Constantinople until the 15th century felt themselves to be rightful successor to the power and authority of Augustus, even if the West Empire fell down in the 5th century. The young emperor took the name Augustus with its religious overtones, and was eventually dubbed the father of his country, an inclusive rather than divisive figure. Augustus' longevity surprised everyone, as did his success, especially beginning already in the early years. Augustus was aware of his public image, so that he wanted to appear a model of proper behavior in private life as well as when performing his official duties. But then, despite his leading position, all Roman politicians advertised their own and their families' merits and achievements at every opportunity. Anyway, it is hard to see past the facade and understand the real man his position. Born Caius Octavius, he became Caius Julius Caesar, and he could have added Octavianus to this as a reminder of his real family's ancestry, but he did not. Only his enemies ever called him Octavianus. As the years passed, he modified his name, dropping the first name Caius and replacing it with the highly unorthodox imperator, victorious general or generalissimo. Thus, we have a man with three very distinct names at different stages of his life, and a fair bit of variation in form and detail even with these. The modern convention is to call him Octavian from the power achievement until 27 before Christ, and after that to call him Augustus, avoiding the name Caesar altogether, and with it the risk of confusion with Julius Caesar. We call him emperor, but he called himself princeps. In fact, imperator did not have the same sense in Augustus' days as in our time. The story. After the death of Julius Caesar, the Roman Republic was in shambles. The Senate had little real power, and men were fighting for the position Caesar held and one Caesar aspired to. Octavian understood that Rome was nothing more than what the Senate made it. If he had wanted to rule, he would have needed their support. He made them believe he was their equal, and they trusted and respected him for it. There was a need for peace. The most amazing thing is how he acquired his power. Octavian did not take control by force. He acquired it through shrewd politics he chose. By appeasing the Senate, they in turn rewarded him with more power and control. Octavian acquired his power legally, and history proves it. After Caesar's death, there was a void left at the top of the government. Two men were the natural choices to take over: Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, or Octavian, Caesar's relative by blood. Antony, who was in Egypt recovering from war in Parthia, fell in love with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Rumors circulated regarding these two and their plans for Rome, one of which included Cleopatra becoming Queen of Rome. Octavian, when alerted of these rumors, declared war against Antony and Cleopatra. After Octavian defeated her fleet, Cleopatra and Antony killed themselves, ending the argument over who should rule Rome. Octavian was in a major bind. He was the most powerful man in Rome. After defeating Mark Antony, he was the apparent heir to Julius Caesar's position, and he had the power of an army behind him. Yet Caesar had had this power too, and it had ended in his murder. How would have Octavian maintained the power he had craved while at the same time doing it without using force? Octavian had two choices. He could have found a way to keep the power, or he could have shown Rome that he was a good man, looking out for its interests. He gave it up. The second method, while not as easy and foolproof as the first, would have been Octavian's best chance for power and a long life. Octavian was also lucky that, at the time, Romans were in dire need of peace. There had been a civil war and constant fighting for 100 years, and they wanted it to end. This worked on Octavian's favor because of the fact that to kill him would have been like opening the position to more power-hungry politicians and generals. Octavian wisely chose the better of the two proposals. He would have kept his power by giving it up. Octavian, taking the advice of his advisors Agrippa and Maecenas, called the Senate together in 27 before Christ. He had already shared the consulship with Agrippa for the past 3 years, which was illegal in the laws of the Republic. He was not the first to serve back-to-back term as consul, so the Senate assumed that he was taking this position on for life.
He shocked them instead by offering to restore Rome to its true form, a republic. Octavian would have given to Senate their power back after they had lost it over the years. He now looked like a man out for the best interests of Rome. If he had publicly stated that he was taking control of Rome, he would have been punished for it. Of course, it was all appearance, but reassuring. Octavian gambled by offering to give up his power, and he won in the Senate, even though not every member was a supporter of Octavian. They could not deny that the past 2 years had been the most peaceful in a century. Those 2 years promised something not worth passing on, regardless of one's feeling for Octavian. After the Senate refused to let him resign, Octavian promised Octavian proposed a new plan. This system called for a government where the Senate and himself would share the power. Any ill feelings that the Senate had towards Octavian were gone for the time being. They were so pleased by the turn of events that they granted him a new title a few months later, Imperator. He defined this position as one which signified the possession of supreme power. This was the first step towards one position that ruled all aspects of government. The emperor had total control of military, and he now had this title. Octavian basically did anyways, but just made it official. The Senate gave Octavian one other title to show their gratitude at having a leader who was not involving them in war. In 27 BCE, the same year as the title Emperor was given to him, the Senate gave him the honorary name of Augustus. The name Augustus meant something that is revered. It was such a revered name that it carried an almost religious meaning with itself. He had never been used before in the ancient world. Octavian accepted the name gracefully, yet he wished to be called by other than Caesar. He was extremely proud that Caesar had adopted his as a son, and he made sure that citizens of Rome recognized it. He called himself Divi Iulis Filius. Now that Augustus knew Romans wanted him to be their leader, he set to work. One thing that he did was to divide the control of the provinces. The use of governors was not working anymore. They could not be trusted. Augustus saw this as an opening. He put all the peaceful provinces under the command of the Senate. He retained power in the tumultuous ones, since the armies would have been in the province where there was unrest. The entire military was basically under his control. Civil wars cannot happen when the army is united under one commander. When necessary, he would have switched the provinces with the Senate to keep the warring ones under his control. After Octavian's death, the Senate position became more difficult. They were frequently opponents, but never Rome went back to the Republic. Soon Tiberius expressed his desire. The senators would help him to make his leadership stronger. He decided to transfer election from the popular assemblies to the Senate. There was no public resistance to the change as it was in the age of the Augustus. Therefore, the senators preferred to win only with their peers over instead of a larger electorate. The quality of magistrates did not alter the efficiency of its mandate as a result of this reform. In AD 26, Tiberius left Rome and never returned to the city anymore. However, he left his consular Seiano in the city. August had left advice to keep the boundaries of the empire where they were. None of the governors of the provinces were entrusted to fight aggressive wars. Tiberius chose not to make wars, and he chose to follow this decision as a doctrine throughout his life. After the audacious attempts with which Drusus and his brother himself Tiberius had dealt with Germany, and despite the famous Varus defeat, Germanicus had continued command on the Rhine, but then he had to leave it to go to the east, and suddenly he died. So the wars were stopped. Under Augustus, the Roman army had undergone several reforms. In the past, a good deal of the regulation of the legions was such a promotion under governor's control. They did not change, but for the fact that the same governor for the bulk of the army was Augustus himself. Military force allowed Augustus to reach his position of dominance, but it could also be the only power able to break his hold on power, so he needed the help of the legions, but they could ruin him. It was necessary to prevent anyone following in its own footsteps, or those of Sulla, Mark Antony. But this was not only a question of reducing the commands given to senators. Legions had to be kept loyal. Augustus had different experiences of mutinies to understand that. He was under his direct control. Most of the men of these legions had served Julius Caesar, so they made an oath to him. It was a very powerful tie, linking them to his lair, but it was not enough, as a mutiny of men impatient for discharge quickly showed. It was very difficult to maintain such a huge army under control. Therefore, it was Augustus that his advisors' duty to decide on the size and shape of the army they would maintain. They had to calculate how many soldiers were necessary to Augustus in order to maintain his position and to defend or, if desired, expand the colonies. In fact, these two things were linked because of the fact that if the empire had appeared weak, it would have damaged Augustus' authoritas, even it was not enough to invalidate his power of political. The possibility that this would appear could have given several enemies to him. At the end, Augustus decided for an army composed by 26 or 27 legions. This was decided after Actium in 29 BC. There were 120,000 soldiers in the countryside, the equivalent of 24 full-strength legions. Probably the soldiers bought for discharge and, unwilling to fight under the colors, were released, and the remaining party of the army was enough to form 26 legions in total. Additional to these forces, there was a similar number of auxiliary troops. Augustus also reformed the length of time a soldier served, increased it from 6 to 20 years. Unlike the Republican legions, which were more temporary citizen levies for the duration of particular wars, Augustus created a professional army with legions becoming permanent units composed of career soldiers. Under the late Republic, a Roman citizen could legally be required to serve a maximum of 16 years in the legions and a maximum of 6 years consecutively. In 13 BC, Augustus decreed 16 years as a standard term of service for legionary recruits, with a further 4 years of reservists. Under the late Republic, a Roman citizen could legally be required to serve a maximum of 16 years in the legions and a maximum of 6 years consecutively. In 13 BC, Augustus decreed 16 years as a standard term of service for legionary recruits, with a further 4 years as a reservist. Evocati. In 85, the standard term was increased to 20 years plus 5 years in the servers. But most importantly, Augustus changed the leave fee. During the Republic, a veteran was given a land in which he could live and create a family, now not having sufficient public land for the soldiers. The payoff was replaced by cash, which considered is with a further 4 years as a reservist. Evocati. In 85, the standard term was increased to 20 years plus 5 years in the servers. But most importantly, Augustus changed the leave fee. During the Republic, a veteran was given a land in which he could live and create a family, now not having sufficient public land for the soldiers. The payoff was replaced by cash, which considered in an amount of 3,000 denarii. If you consider that a soldier earned 230 denarii per year, this was a quite large sum of money. Augustus was restrained in his personal use of power. He tried not to force people to do his will and left at least the appearance of choice. For instance, Augustus wanted an epic poem written about his life. While it's true that he eventually got one, he didn't punish those in his literary circle who turned it down. a social and cultural program enlisting literature and other arts, revived time-honored values and costumes, and promoted allegiance to Augustus and his family. Writers were encouraged to propose works that proclaimed its imperial destiny. Augustus and his colleague, the wealthy Etruscan Maecenas, encouraged and support members of the circle, including Propertius, Horace, and Virgil. Maecenas knew the power of poetry and viewed it as a way of glorify Augustus' regime. In spite of his significant contribution to the new political order in Rome, Maecenas is still best known for being a patron of the arts. He supported and promoted the careers of such great Latin intellectuals. The Augustan era is known as a golden age of Latin literature, and it marks the first time in which Latin rose to the same level as Greek in terms of original literary contributions. Maecenas can be thought of as a first being the flowering of Latin culture, not only during his own life, but for several generations that followed. Propertius didn't need the financial input, but more than that, he wasn't interested in writing epic. He supported and promoted the careers of such great Latin intellectuals. The Augustan era is known as a golden age of Latin literature, and it marks the first time in which Latin rose to the same level as Greek in terms of original literary contributions. Maecenas can be thought of as a first being the flowering of Latin culture, not only during his own life, but for several generations that followed. Propertius didn't need the financial input, but more than that, he wasn't interested in writing epic. Virgil, who likewise received remuneration, kept instead promising to write the epic. He died, however, before finishing the Aeneid, which is considered an ambitious attempt to join the legendary history of Rome with the glorious and noble present embodied in Emperor Augustus. There can be no question of a state-controlled literature, but there may have been then encouraged from the top to express the correct view, coupled with genuine gratitude and relief on the part of the patrons and readers alike, due to the fact that Augustus had restored peace and stability to public affairs. The succession, which eventually ended at Tiberius at the end of Augustus' principality, was one of the greatest concerns of Augustus' life. Octavianus did not manage to have any blood heir, therefore he decided to adopt Tiberius Claudius Nero's son, whose mother was the second wife of Augustus. In fact, after Octavianus' death, on the 19th Augustus 40 AD, Tiberius Augustus' main heir succeeded him.
Before dying, Octavianus bequeathed the vast sum of 43 million sesterces to the state, as well as individual bounties to every citizen and to the army. This generosity was a clear acknowledgement that supremacy ultimately relied on retaining the exclusive loyalty of the army. The new Emperor Tiberius Julius Caesar already possessed all the main powers of Augustus, such as the Maius Imperium and the Tribunicia Potestas. The news of Octavianus' death spread all over the province, and it caused mutinies among some of the legions of the Danube and afterwards of the Rhine. These mutinies were due to the uncertainty of a world without the men who had paid them and to whom they had taken an oath of loyalty. The mutineers wanted nothing more than improved conditions and other immediately privileges. In 63 BC, the largest city in the known world was Rome, with a population numbered at least 3/4 of a million. Most people lived in insulae that were overcrowded. Inevitably, there were many births and deaths every day. Unsanitary, seedy, and also prone to fire. Augustus was aware of his public image, but the other Roman politicians advertised their wealth and their families' merits every time they could. Roman politicians lived their lives in public, so public life at Rome was ugly, theatrical. An example could be the one of Mark Antony, whose reputation has far more to do with his own propaganda than with his realistic military experiences and abilities. Augustus, on the contrary, wanted to appear a model of proper behavior in private life as well as in military campaigns. So, probably, the senatorial opposition obliged Augustus to hide the reality of his power behind a republican facade. The changes that took place in the institutional, social, economic, physical area visibly transformed Rome and the major empire, and they assume a true importance if we think about the peace they wanted to reach. The center of Rome by AD 14 was organized in different areas after Augustus' building program. He completed the Forum of Iulius and built the Forum of Augustus in the civic center of the city, as a visible and permanent proof of his merits. He also restored ruined and burned temples and put the main roads in good condition. Some of the areas that composed the city center were the Curia, Basilica Aemilia, Sacred Way, Umbilicus Urbis, Temple of Concordia, Temple of Saturn, Rostra, Basilica Iulia, Temple of Castor, Pool of Juturna, Vesta, Arch of Augustus, and the Temple of Divus Iulius. Some other findings are the Theatre of Merida. Augusta Emerita, nowadays Merida, in Spain was established as a colony of discharged soldiers after the Spanish campaigns. Theatre of Marcellus. The stone theatre, like many other monuments, was planned by Julius Caesar, but the work only occurred under Augustus, who named it in honor of his nephew, Marcellus. It was used in different ways through time. In the Middle Ages, it was used as a fortress. During the Renaissance, it was transformed into a palace, and later divided into apartments. Statue based from Athens. An enclosed theatre at Athens was constructed by Agrippa, and in thanks, the city reused an old statue base which had carried images of Hellenistic kings and Antony and Cleopatra, and set up a statue to Agrippa, describing him as their own benefactor. The Gate of Athena. The fame of Athens ensured that it received its share of largesse. About the western gate of the Roman Agora, or marketplace, the inscription were proclaiming that it was dedicated to the goddess Athena, and the money was furnished by Augustus between 11 and 9 BC. Enemies. This larger-than-life head of Augustus was found in Sudan. It was buried under the steps of a temple, perhaps as a symbolic humiliation, and perhaps to hide it from the reprisal raids launched by the Romans. Whereas the appearance of the barbarians had not changed much, such leaders are depicted on Trajan's column set up a century after Augustus' death. A more in-depth description of Augustus' family tree. The father of Caesar was Gaius Iulius Caesar the Elder, proconsul of Asia in 90s BC, and the mother was Mother Aurelia, one of the Aurelii Cottae. He had got two sisters, Iulia Major and Iulia Minor. His notable relatives were Gaius Marius, married to his paternal aunt Iulia, Mark Antony, his relative through Antony's mother Iulia, Lucius Iulius Caesar, his third cousin, Iulius Sabinus, a Gaul of the Lingones at the time of the Batavian Rebellion of AD 69, claimed to be the great-grandson of Caesar on the grounds that his great-grandmother had been Caesar's lover during the Gallic Wars. Caesar had got three wives: Cornelia, Sinilla, from 84 BC until her death in 69 or 68 BC, Pompeia from 67 BC until he divorced her around 61 BC over the Bonadea scandal, and Calpurnia from 59 BC until Caesar's death. His children were Iulia by Cornelia, born in 83 or 82 BC, Caesario by Cleopatra VII, born in 47 BC and killed at the age of 17 by Caesar's adopted son Octavianus. Posthumously adopted Gaius Iulius Caesar Octavianus, his great-nephew by blood, grandson of Iulia, his sister, who later became Emperor Augustus. Caesar had also suspected children: Marcus Junius Brutus, born in 85 BC. The historian Plutarch notes that Caesar believed Brutus to have been his illegitimate son, as his mother Servilia had been Caesar's lover during their youth. Caesar would have been 15 years old when Brutus was born. Iunia Tertia, born 60 BC, the daughter of Caesar's lover Servilia, was believed by Cicero, among other contemporaries, to be Caesar's natural daughter. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, born 85-81 BC. On several occasions, Caesar expressed how he loved Decimus Brutus like a son. This Brutus was also named an heir of Caesar in case Octavius had died before the latter. Moreover, he had a grandson from Iulia and Pompey, dead at several days, unnamed.